props like that. We're going to go and accept onChange to be an arrow function, which returns a void, but inside of its props is going to have an optional URL like that. Let's give it a value of string and an endpoint possibilities of message file or server image like that. So while you're writing this, make sure that it matches this. So let's see what's the, okay, no worries about it yet. So when you're writing this endpoint message file and server image, please confirm inside of your app API uploading core.ts that it matches these objects right here. So server image and message file, it needs to match exactly those two right here. Great. Now let's assign these props in this file upload component. So I'm going to extract all of those. So onChange value and endpoint like that. And let's just add the prop file upload props like that. Great. And you can see how in my initial model, all the errors are gone. And if I try something that doesn't exist, you can see that I have an error. So I can only do server image or message file. For this case, it's going to be server image because we're creating our server. Great. So now in this file upload component, let's go ahead and let's create an actual upload drop zone for this. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and let's import upload drop zone from @/lib/upload thing like this. So don't do a mistake, don't import it from some package. We are using our upload thing lib. So this is an important thing. And below that, go ahead and import @upload thing /react/styles.css. So we get some nice styling. Great. Now right here, instead of rendering this div, let's go ahead and let's render the upload drop zone, which we just imported. Let's go ahead and give it an endpoint type. You can see that this endpoint also only has options of message file and server image. So it matches our props right here. So we can safely pass the endpoint prop and it's going to work. Great. And now let's do the onClient upload complete like that to be a response like that. And all I'm going to do is onChange response dot first in array dot file URL like this. Great. And let's go ahead and let's do on upload error to be error, type of error like that. And well, you can either we can console log this for now like this. Great. Let's go ahead now and let's actually check if this is working right here. So I have no files inside of my upload thing now, but let's see what happens if I try and add an image from Unsplash. So I'm going to click this, click on upload, and let's see if this succeeds. So let me refresh my upload thing now, and there we go. So you can see this image from Unsplash is right here. Great. So you successfully created your upload thing drop zone. What we have to do now is we have to find a way to show different render depending on whether we uploaded an image or not, because we want to see what we just uploaded. So let's go ahead and let's do that now. And as you can see, I have a small strike over this file URL. It seems like there was an update with upload thing. So there's a very simple explanation here. It says that this declaration was marked as deprecated and that we use URL instead. So let's go ahead and replace this with URL like this. There we go. So I'm pretty sure file URL is still going to work, but it's deprecated. So use URL to have the most up-to-date version. Great. All right, now let's go and let's actually try and find a way to render this image right here. So in order to do that, let's go all the way to the top first. Whoops. Okay. And let's go ahead and import X from Lucid React like that. And let's go ahead and let's import image from next/image like this. Great. And now let's go ahead and check if we have a value. If we have a value, that means that we are ready to render something. Great. So let's first extract the file type. So const file type is going to be value.split. So we are practically checking that URL, and we're going to go ahead and split this by a dot pop like this. And now we're going to check if there is a value, and if file type is not PDF, that means, okay, this is an image. So we can go ahead and return a div with a class name of relative h-20 and w-20, and you can already see that we no longer have that drop zone. We now have a space to render our image inside. And now let's actually use this image which we imported from next/image. So make sure you have this import right here. And let's go ahead and give it a field property, a source to be value property, an alt to be upload like that. Whoops. And let's also give it a class name of rounded-full. And if I save this, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get an error. That is because we have to add upload thing to our list of domains for images. So let me show you this again. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to upload this Unsplash image right here. And after it's uploaded, we should get an error right here because upload thing is not configured under your images in next.config.js. So that is actually very simple to fix. So what you have to do whenever you get this error, when you add a new image, go ahead and find what host name it says. So in my case, it's uploadthing.com, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same in yours. So go ahead and go inside. I'm going to close everything and go inside of your next.config.js. Inside of this object, add images, add domains like this, open an array, and just paste in uploadthing.com. And what I recommend doing is restarting your application entirely. So npm run dev like this, and refresh your application. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back inside of my components, file upload.tsx, and let's try this one more time. So I'm going to go ahead and upload this file right here, and let's see what happens. And there we go. You can see that I have my uploaded image right here. And one thing that I want to do is I want to add a button to remove it. So let's go ahead and add a button. So just a normal button, native HTML button element. And let's go ahead and let's render the X which we imported from Lucid React right here. And let's go ahead and let's give this button a class name of h-4 and w-4. And let's go ahead and give this button an onClick to be an arrow function which calls the onChange and just sends an empty string. And class name for this one is going to be bg-rows-500 text-white padding 1 rounded-full. Oops, let's not misspell rounded. So rounded-full like that. Absolute top-0 right-0 shadow-sm like this. And let's also give it a type of button like this. There we go. So now we have a nice little X button right here. So if I click, there we go. We can upload a different image, for example. Great. So you have successfully created this image upload. And now what we can go ahead is we can expand this entire thing. And I'm going to go ahead and open my console, and I'm going to write code with Antonio here, and I'm going to go ahead and click create, and there we go. You can see that I have my name. Let me just zoom in. So I have my name and my image URL, and I'm going to send both of these things on the server, on the API, and then we're going to create our first server model. Great job. So now let's go ahead and let's actually send this information to the API. So I'm going to close some stuff here, and you can close your upload thing inside. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and I'm going to open a new terminal so I can start npx Prisma Studio like this. So let me just zoom out so you can see npx Prisma Studio like that. Great. And inside right now, I only have this one profile. But what I want to create now is this server, which currently says 0. And if I visit, you can see that it's actually 0. So let's go ahead and let's modify our initial model to actually call this API route. Before we can do that, let's go ahead and let's actually install a package. So I'm going to close this and I'm just going to write npm install Axios like this. So just make sure you have that. And I'm going to start my app using npm run dev again. Great, so I will just refresh my application here and let's go inside of our components, models, initial model right here. Great. And now let's find the onSubmit function, which currently just logs our values here. So let's go ahead and let's turn this into a try and catch block. Let's resolve the error here first. So for now, all we're going to do is log this error right here. And in the try, let's go ahead and use await Axios. And let's go ahead and let's import Axios from Axios like this. And what we are going to call is axios.post/API/servers like this and pass in the values like this. Great. After that succeeds, we're going to do form.reset. We're going to do router, but before we can do router, we actually have to add that hook. So just above the state, add const router to be use router from next/navigation. So make sure you don't accidentally import it from next/router. So next/navigation like that. And now go ahead and call router.refresh like that. And window.location.refresh like this. Great. My apologies, not refresh, reload. There we go. Great. So let's go ahead and let's create this /API/servers route. So let's go back inside of our app folder, inside of API, and create a new folder called servers like that. And inside, go ahead and create route.ts file like this. Great. And before we continue building inside, I'm going to create a little util which we're going to use across all of our routes and server components to check the current profile. So let's go inside of our lib folder and create a new file, current-profile.ts like this. Inside of this lib current profile, I'm going to import out from clerk next.js. And I'm going to import db from ./db, but I'm going to replace it to /lib like this. I'm going to export the constant current profile, which is an asynchronous function like that. I'm going to go ahead and call user ID from out like that. If there is no user ID, I'm going to return null for the current profile, meaning that we cannot find the current profile. And if there is a user ID, I'm going to write const profile to be await db.profile.find unique like that, where user ID like this, and just return the profile like that. Great. So now that we have that current profile inside of our lib folder, we can go back inside of our route, which is located inside of the app folder, API servers route. And let's go ahead now and let's import all the necessary things we need. So let's go ahead and import this current profile from /lib current profile. Let's go ahead and let's import db from /lib db like that. Great. And let's write export const async function post like that, which is going to take a request like that. My apologies. So not a constant, just an asynchronous function. So export asynchronous function post like that. Let's open a try and catch block and let's resolve the error first. So I'm going to write console.log and I'm going to write servers post like this error. So I'm logging this just so it's easier for my development to know if something went wrong and that I have this indicator telling me, okay, I know what file this is now and this is where I have to debug. and let's just return new next response, which you can import from next/server. And let's go ahead and pass internal error like that with a status of 500 like that. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's extract the name and image URL from our body. In order to do that, we're going to use await request.json and execute that like this. Great. Now let's get the current profile. So const profile is equal to await current profile, which we imported like that. Great. If there is no profile, in that case, return new next response, unauthorized, with a status of 401 like this. Great. And if there is a profile, we can go ahead and we can create our first server. But before we can do that, let's install one more package. So I'm going to go inside of my terminal. I'm going to shut down my app and I'm going to write npm install UUID like this. Great. And let's go ahead and let's import the UUID at the top. So we're going to use import the structure v4 as UUID v4 from UUID like this. And we also need to install the types. So let's go ahead and I'm just gonna zoom out a bit so you can see it in one line. npm install -D at types/UUID like this. And after you install that, this error should go away. So we installed UUID and we installed a dev dependency of types/UUID. Great. And you can go ahead and run your application again and just refresh your local host here. Great. So now that we have that, I'm just also going to move the next server to the top. Let's go ahead now and let's actually create our server here. So const server is going to be await db.server.create like that, and data is gonna be profile ID to be profile.id, which we just fetched. Name is gonna be name, so you can either write name or you can use the shorthand operator like this. Same thing for image URL. Invite code is gonna be randomly generated, so UUID v4 and just execute this and make sure it's imported like this. Great, so now we have a unique invite code for this server. And let's go ahead and let's create the initial channels. So channels, open an object, write create, open an array, and let's create the channel. So name of the channel is going to be general like that, and profile ID of the creator is going to be profile.id like that. Great. And the same way we created channels, let's also create the members. So members, create, open an array, and the first member inside is going to be profile ID, profile.id, and their role is going to be member role, which you can import from @prisma/client. So let me show you that. There we go. Make sure you have this imported. So member role from @prisma/client. This is in our Prisma schema, and use member role.admin like this. There we go. So our initial member who created this server is gonna be assigned as an admin of that server. Great. And then we can go ahead and return next response.json server like this. Great. And now let's go back inside of our initial model, which is in components models initial model right here. And let's see what happens. What I think is going to happen is we're going to successfully create our server, but we're going to get a 404 page after that. And I'm going to explain why in a second. So I'm going to upload an image from my YouTube channel right here. I'm going to name this server code with Antonio like that. And let's click create. And let's see if this is going to work. So it's refreshing, and there we go. We are at a 404 page, but let's check our Prisma Studio and let's check if our server has been created. There we go. We have a working server with invite code, profile ID. You can see how it has a member right here, and that member is a type of admin. You can see the channels. It has a channel relation, and that channel's name is general. You can see the profile relation. You can see the image URL from upload thing, the name, everything in this Prisma Studio audio is completely fine. And now, why are we getting this 404 error? Well, in order to explain that, we have to go inside of our app folder, inside of our setup folder page.tsx. So remember what we are doing here. We are getting the initial profile. So we are either creating it or we are getting the current user. And if we have a profile, we attempt to find the initial server that this user is in. If there is no server, we return an initial model to create one. Otherwise, we redirect to the URL of that server. So that's why we are getting a 404 error right here, because this page right here does not exist. If you check the URL, you can see it's at s/servers and the ID of that server. So our next step is to create a view which can render the current server that the user is in. So let's go ahead and let's create this page right here. So where I'm gonna go is I'm gonna close everything and I'm gonna go inside of my app folder and I'm gonna create a new organizational route called main, like this. And inside I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna create a new routes organizational folder. And inside I'm gonna create another folder called servers, like this. And inside I'm gonna create another folder in brackets server ID, like this. And inside of that, I'm gonna add page.tsx, like this. So this is our route. So main, routes, servers, server ID. And let's go ahead and let's call this server page, like that, with a div server ID page, like this. And let's just rename this from server page to server ID page. It doesn't matter for the functionality, but I think it's good that we are consistent. Great, so now we no longer have that error. Now let's go ahead inside of our organizational main folder right here. And besides it having this routes folder, it's also gonna have a file layout.tsx, like this. So let me show you how this looks. So we have a main organizational folder, we have the routes organizational folder, and outside of that we have layout.tsx inside of that main folder. So let's go ahead and let's write main layout, like that. It's going to be an asynchronous function. Let's go ahead and destructure the children, and let's give this children a type of children to be React node, like this. And let's go ahead and let's create a div with a class name of h-full, like that. And let's just render the children inside, and then our text should appear back on the site. Great. Now, above this children, let's create a div with a class name of hidden md flex h-full w dash open square brackets 72 pixels z dash 30 flex dash call fixed and inset dash y dash 0, like this. And let's go ahead and let's wrap our children inside of a main element, like this. And let's go ahead and give this a class name of mdpl dash open square brackets 72 pixels h dash full, like this. Great. And now I'm gonna expand my screen, and there we go. You can see how now my content has moved a bit to the right. So make sure that when you're developing this, you zoom out enough so that you can see this being separated from this corner right here. If you zoom in, it's gonna jump into mobile mode and it's not gonna render our sidebar. So yes, this is gonna be completely responsive. I forgot to mention that. So just make sure that you're seeing a bit of a space between server ID page and this corner right here, so you know you're working in desktop mode. What we have to build now is the navigation sidebar. So I'm gonna add navigation sidebar right here. And if I save, of course, I'm gonna get an error. So let's go ahead and let's add that. So inside of our components, create a new folder called navigation, like this. And inside, create a new file, navigation-sidebar.tsx, like this. So I'm just gonna expand this a little bit so you can see the name. So navigation-sidebar.tsx, like this. Great. Let's go ahead and let's export const navigation sidebar like this. And let's just return a div saying navigation sidebar like that. And now we can go back inside of our app folder, main layout.tsx, and we can import the navigation sidebar from add/components/navigation/navigation -sidebar like this. And if you save, the error should be gone. Just remember to expand your page a bit. And there we go. You can see that now we have this mushed text. So this one says navigation sidebar and this one says server ID page. Great. Let's go ahead and let's go back inside of our navigation sidebar, which we just created inside of this components folder, inside of the navigation folder, and let's start slowly developing this. So this is going to be a server component. So let's make it asynchronous right here. And let's go ahead and let's fetch the current profile. So const profile is going to be await current profile from @/lib/current profile like this. If there is no profile, we're going to return redirect from next/navigation to / like this. Great. So I'm just going to separate this two like that. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's find all the servers that this user is a part of. So const service is going to be await db.server.find many like that. And I forgot to import db. So let's go ahead and let's import db from @/lib/db like that. And inside of this find many, let's write where members like this sum profile ID is equal to profile.id like that. Great. And now let's go ahead and let's start styling this sidebar. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a class name to this div right here. So class name, it's going to be space-y-4 flex-call items-center h-full text-primary w-full dark is going to be bg- open square brackets hashtag 1e1f22 like that, and py is going to be 3 like this. Great. So now you can see how I have a nice little dark sidebar right here. Again, just expand your screen a bit if you're not seeing it, because if you collapse too much, it goes into mobile mode. Okay, now that we have that, let's go ahead and let's create a navigation action component. So in order to do that, we're going to have to install a package from ShadCN. So let's go ahead and let's find our tooltip component. So let's find it right here. It's tooltip, so it's all the way down. And we have to run this command right here to add it. So I'm going to copy it for npm like that. I'm going to shut down my app, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shut down this as well. So npx ShadCN UI at latest add tooltip like that, and just press enter and confirm this installation. And while we are here, let's also find the separator. So go ahead and below the select, I have the separator right here, and we're going to add it as well because we need it. So this command right here, npx ShadCN-UI at latest add a separator, and press enter and confirm the installation of these components. After that, you can go ahead and npm run dev your application. I'm going to refresh this right here, and I'm just going to collapse it a bit so it's still, make sure always that the navigation is visible, because that's what we are working with now. Great. And now, so remove this navigation sidebar text and add the navigation action component, which right now does not exist, and we're going to get an error. So let's go inside of this navigation folder inside of components and find a new file, navigation-action.tsx like this. Mark it as use client like that. And let's go and export const navigation action like that. And let's go ahead and return a div saying action. Let's go back to our navigation sidebar in the same folder, and let's import navigation action from /navigation action. And I'm going to separate this even more because it's a relative import here. There we go. Now it says action in this sidebar. Now let's go back and let's start styling it a bit. So What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button inside of this div. I'm going to go ahead and create a div inside with a class name of flex mx-3 h dash open square brackets 48 pixels like that, w dash 48 pixels like that, rounded dash 24 pixels, so half of this width. And let's go and give it group dash hover like this to be rounded dash open square brackets 16 pixels like this, transition dash all, overflow dash hidden, items dash center like this. We're also going to need to add justify dash center, bg dash background, dark bg dash neutral dash 700, group dash hover bg dash emerald dash 500 like this. Great. And inside of this div, we're going to add a plus from Lucid React. So make sure you import this. And let's go ahead and let's give that a class name as well of group dash hover text dash white transition and text dash emerald dash 500 like this. And let's give it a size of 50 like that. There we go. Sorry, not 50, 25 like this. There we go. So now you have a nice little plus icon, but when we hover, nothing is happening. So we have to go back inside of this button right here and let's give it a class name of group. And now when you try and hover, you can see that we have this nice little effect right here. Great. Alongside group, we're also going to add a flex and items dash center inside. Great job. Now let's go ahead and let's create our action tooltip component. So we're going to use that when we hover, it's going to explain what this action does. So let's go inside of our components and create a new file, action-tooltip.tsx. So this one right here. Great. Let's mark this as use client like that. Let's import everything we need from the tooltip. Well, actually, we cannot import any. Oh, we added the tooltip. My apologies. So import tooltip, tooltip content, tooltip provider, and tooltip trigger from /components/ action tooltip. My apologies. UI/tooltip like this. Great. So tooltip content, provider, and trigger from components, UI, tooltip like that. Great. Let's create an interface action tooltip like that. So action tooltip props. Label is going to be a string. Children are going to be react.react node like this. Side is going to be optional, and the values are going to be top, start, bottom, and left. And instead of start, we're going to write right. My apologies. And the align is also going to be optional with props start, center, and end like this. Great. And let me just replace this commas with semicolons. And now let's actually build this component. So export const action tooltip like this. Let's go ahead and let's destruct label, children, side, and align. Let's map them to these props. So action tooltip props like that. And let's go ahead and return this. And let's return a tooltip provider, which we imported. Let's add the tooltip. Let's give it a delay duration of 50. And let's give it a tooltip trigger like this. We're just going to render our children. And let's give this tooltip trigger a prop as child like this. And inside, just below the tooltip trigger, let's add the tooltip content like this. Let's give it a side prop, which matches to our side prop, and the same thing with align. So it's not going to be a string, but our align prop like that. And inside, we're going to render a paragraph, which is going to write the label dot to lowercase like this. And then we can give this paragraph a class name of font-semi-bold, text-sm, and capitalize like this. Great. So now let's go back to our navigation action component inside of this navigation folder inside of components. And let's go ahead and let's import action tooltip from /action tooltip, or I'm going to replace it to components action tooltip like this. And let's go ahead and let's wrap this button around with action tooltip. So action tooltip like this. All we have to do is wrap the button like this and indent it. And let's go ahead and let's pass in the necessary props. So side is going to be right, align is going to be center, and label is going to be add a server like this. And save this file. And now when you hover, you have a beautiful tooltip. So let me just expand this a little bit and let me zoom in. So when you hover, you have a beautiful add a server tooltip. So that's exactly what we wanted to develop. Great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and so obviously this button is going to trigger a model which is going to enable us to create more servers. But before we do all that, let's actually start rendering our active servers that we are a part of. So I'm going to close everything so it's easier for us. Let's go back to components, navigation, to navigation sidebar component. And after navigation action, let's add a separator, which we added. So make sure you don't accidentally import it from Radix. Make sure you import it from /UI/separator. So let me show you how your import is supposed to look. It's supposed to look like this, but I'm going to change it to add/components/UI separator, and I'm going to move it to the top right here. Now let's modify this separator a bit by giving it a class name. And the class name is going to be h-2pixels like that, bg sync 300, dark bg sync 700, rounded -md like this, w-10, and mx-auto like this. So these are the classes for our separator. Great, so you can see how now it looks a little bit better. Great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add another component from Shadcn called scroll area. So let's go ahead and expand this and let's find our scroll area right here. Let's find the CLI installation. So npx Shadcn latest scroll area. I'm going to go inside of my terminal and I'm going to paste that here. Let me just expand this so you can see it in one line. So npx Shadcn UI at latest add scroll area, and let's press enter and let's confirm this installation. Now let's go ahead and run our application again. I'm just going to expand my screen so my sidebar is visible, and I'm going to refresh my localhost. Great. Below the separator, add a scroll area and import it from /UI/scroll area like this. And let me show you this import. So I'm just going to replace it to /components/UI, and I'm going to move it right here. So this is how it's supposed to look in one line, scroll area from add/components/UI scroll area. Great. Let me just change this back so it's visible. And inside of this scroll area, well, before we put anything inside, let's just give it a class name of flex-1 and w-full. Great. And what we're going to do inside is we're going to render these servers that the user is a part of. So let's go ahead and let's run servers.map server. And let's go ahead and for now, let's just do a div. Let's give it a key of server.id. So we fix that error. And let's go ahead and let's just render server.name inside. And there we go. Now it says code with Antonio for me here because I am in that server. Great. Now, instead of rendering that, we're actually going to render navigation item, which is going to render our server. Great. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So I'm going to replace this server name with navigation item like that. And if we save, we are going to get an error. Before we fix this error, let's go back to this div and just give it a class name of margin bottom 4 like this. Let's go back inside of our components, find the navigation folder and create a new file, navigation-item.tsx like this. Great. Let's go inside. Let's mark this as use client like that. Let's import image from next/image like this. Let's import use params and use router from next/navigation. Let's import cn from add/lib-utils, and let's import the action tooltip, which we created from /action tooltip, but I'm going to replace it to /components action tooltip. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's create an interface. So interface, navigation item props are going to be ID, which is a string, image URL, which is a string, and name, which is a string like this. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's write export const navigation item. Let's extract all of those. So ID, image URL, and name like this. And let me just confirm. Okay, make sure this is marked as use client. I just wanted to confirm that. And let's map this props to navigation item props like that. And let's go ahead and let's return a div saying server like this. Let's go back to our navigation sidebar where we render the navigation item and let's import it. So navigation item from /navigation item, and we can leave it like this just below the navigation action. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's actually give it the props it needs. So I'm going to go ahead and give it an ID of server.id. I'm going to give it a name of server.name, and I'm going to give it an image URL of server.image URL like this. There we go. So I can see a small text saying server right here. So let's go back inside of this navigation item, and we're going to go ahead and start by wrapping this entire thing into a tooltip. So action tooltip like this. And let's just add back this div saying server. And let's go ahead and let's give it a side of right. Let's give it an align of center, and let's give it a label of the server name like this. So when you hover, it says code with Antonio. So that's the server that we are going to click on. Great. Let's replace this div with a native button element like this. And let's go ahead and let's give it an onClick of an empty arrow function for now, and a class name of group relative flex items dash center like this. And inside we're going to replace this with a div, and this div is going to have a class name which is not going to be a string but a dynamic class using cn, which we imported right here from lib-utils. So let's go ahead and open this function. In the first parameter I'm going to give it an absolute left dash 0 bg dash primary rounded dash r dash full transition dash all and w dash 4 pixels like this. Then I'm gonna go ahead and add the parameters. So go ahead and add const params from use params, which we have imported right here alongside use router from next/navigation. So below that we can also add the router like that. And now let's add changes to this div depending on if the server ID is clicked on or not. So if params $server ID is not equal to ID, in that case group-hover will change the height to 20 pixels. Otherwise, so let me just expand this just a little bit so you can see it in one line. Okay. Params $server ID is equal to ID. In that case, we're going to do height 36 pixels like that. And this is not going to be an end sign. My apologies. This should be a question mark like this. So if we are on server, we're going to have this height. Otherwise, height is going to be 8 pixels like this. All right, so let's see what we've done. So I'm going to write server back in here. And let me just expand this and zoom back in. And there we go. You can see that now I'm having this little white bar, which doesn't make too much sense now, but it's gonna make once we add some more things here. Okay. And also, you can remove this server inside, and this div is gonna be a self-closing div. So you can just do this, like that. There we go. Great. Now below that, let's go ahead and create a new div, also with the dynamic class name using cn. Let's give it some default classes. So relative, group, flex, mx-3, h-48 pixels, like that, w-48 pixels, rounded-24 pixels, group-hover, rounded-16 pixels, like this, transition-all, and overflow-hidden, like this. Now let's write some dynamic classes. So params question mark.server ID is equal to ID, in that case, bg-primary /10 text-primary and a rounded-16 pixels, like this. Great. And inside, we're gonna render an image from next/image. So make sure you have that imported right here. Image from next/image. We're gonna add the fill prop. The source is gonna be image URL from our props, and alt is gonna be channel, like this. So let me just expand this, and there we go. You can see that I have my Code with Antonio server right here. Great. And you can't really see right now, but when we add more servers, you're gonna see some nice animations with this little white bar here, and it's gonna expand like this button here when we hover over inactive servers. Great, great job. So you finished that. And now let's just add an onClick function here. So const onClick. Whoops, let's do a proper arrow function to be router.push. Add backticks /servers/ID, like this. And let's add this onClick to this empty arrow function, like this. So when we click on one of these icons in the sidebar, we're going to load that specific server. We are already in here, so nothing is happening. Great. So we are done with the navigation item. Let's go back to navigation sidebar. What we have to add next is our user button and our mode toggle. So outside of this scroll area, go ahead and create a new div. Go ahead and give it a class name of padding bottom 3, margin top auto, flex, items-center, like this, flex-call, and gap-y-4. Let's render the mode toggle. We already have that. We invented that when we added dark and light mode. So you can import that from /mode toggle. So let me show you. There we go, /mode toggle. I'm gonna change it to /components mode toggle, and I'm gonna move it along with my other components. Great, so we have the mode toggle, and below that add the user button from add clerk/next.js. So just like this, user button, and I'm gonna move this import with all the other global imports like this. And let's go ahead and let's add after sign out URL to be / like this, and let's change the appearance elements avatar box to be h-48 pixels and w-48 pixels as well, so it matches the size of our other servers. There we go. So now we can change the mode from here as well. Great. And you can also click on this icon to log out. And if we didn't have this appearance prop, you can see that it would look much smaller. So this way it just fits our content inside. And make sure you refresh this before you try to log out because of this after sign out URL. Great. So what we have to do next is when we click on add a server, we have to open a similar model like that initial model to actually create a new server. Let's go ahead and let's create this action that when we click on this button to add a server, a model opens up and we can do the action we did a bit before this. Before we head there, I just want to do one click modification for this a light and dark mode toggle. So I don't like that this has such a dark background as opposed to this sidebar right here. So let's go inside of the mode toggle button, which is inside of our components mode toggle right here. And in this button right here, I just want to give it a class name of bg-transparent like this and border-0 like that. And now if you go ahead and look how it looks, there we go. It seems to be much more blended in and it's not that noticeable. See, there isn't like a visible color around it except when we hover, which is completely fine. We want that indicator. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's install a package called Zustand so we can work with our models. So npm install Zustand right here. And once this is done, I want to go ahead and I want to add, actually we already have the dialog because we have a model. So you can just go ahead and run the application. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create our model store. So let's go ahead and close everything here. And let's go and create a new folder. Oops. A new folder outside of our components, outside of our app. So just a complete new folder called hooks like this. And inside of the hooks, let's go ahead and create a new file use-model-store.ts like this. So we're going to use this hook to control all models in our application. So let's go ahead and import create from Zustand like this. And let's go ahead and let's export type model type. And in here, we're going to hold all possibilities of our models. And the first one is going to be create server like this. So later, we're going to expand this with types like edit server, create channel and stuff like that. But no need to add that now. I just want to show you an example of how that's going to look. For now, it's going to be just this. Great. Now let's create an interface, model store like that. We're going to have a type, which is model type or null like this. We're also going to have is open, which is a Boolean. We're going to have on open, which is going to be a function, which accepts the type. So we direct what type of model we want to open like that and just return a void like this. And I made a typo, so it's model type, not model. There we go. And we're also going to have on close, which is just a void function like this. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's export const use model create model store for the typings. Go ahead and open this function. Go ahead and open another function. And let's just go ahead and immediately return an object. And let's add all of these types from the store. So type by default is going to be null. Is open is going to be false. On open is going to accept a type. And it's going to call set. It's going to change the is open to true. And it's going to set the type of the opened model. And we're going to have on close, which is going to call set. It's going to return the type to null. And it's going to call is open to be false like this. Great. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and let's create our create server model. So I'm going to go ahead inside of my components, inside of models right here, and you can copy and paste this initial model and just rename it to create server model like this. Great. So let's go ahead and let's change the name of initial model. Just make sure that you are inside of create server model file. And let's change this to create server model like that. We are no longer going to need this is mounted thing. So you can remove that. You can remove this use effect and you can remove this if is mounted return null like that. And you can also remove this React import. We're not going to need that because we're going to handle that in a model provider. Great. So now let's go ahead and let's see what we have to change from this onSubmit function. So inside, we no longer need this window.location.reload. So we can remove that like this. And everything else can actually stay the same, except this hard-coded open. So for that, we're going to need to add our use model hook. So let's go ahead and let's go above the router and add const, unless the structure is open, on close and type from use model, from add/hooks/use model store. So it's this import which we just created here, and let's see how that looks. So there we go, export const use model right here. Great. So from here, with the structured is open, on close and type. So first, let's create a constant which is going to watch whether this specific model is opened or not. So const is model open is gonna be is open, and if type is equal to create server, like this. Great. And now let's replace this hard-coded open in dialog with this is model open, like that. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's create a custom onClose function here. So const handle close is going to be an arrow function, which is going to reset the form, and it's going to call onClose from this destructured props from the use model hook. Great. And now we can go ahead and add this to onOpen change to be, onOpen change to be this newly created hook handle close, like this. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's create our model provider. So I'm going to close everything here. I'm going inside of my components, inside of my providers, and I'm going to create a new file, model-provider.tsx, like this. Let's mark this as use client, and let's import create server model from /models create server model, but I'm going to change it to add/components. There we go. So let me just expand my screen. There we go. So in one line, create server model from add/components/models create server model, aka this component right here. Great. And in here, let's go ahead and let's export const model provider, like this, and all it's going to do is return a fragment, and inside of this fragment we're going to render all of our models. For now we just have this one. We also have the initial model, but that one is handled in a very specific way. It's rendered directly, so that's why we don't connect it to toStand and all the hooks. It can work independently, but all the other models in our application are going to be controlled by some on clicks, by some use effects and stuff like that. That's why we are separating them like this. Great. And since I removed the is mounted from this create server model, because I said we're going to handle that somewhere else, this is where I meant. So let's go ahead and let's write const is mounted, set is mounted, use state from React, default value is false, use effect like this, empty dependency array, set is mounted to true, like this. And if we are not mounted, return null. So what this is doing is preventing the models to be rendered on the server side, because that can create inconsistencies, thus creating hydration errors. And keep in mind, whenever I write use client, that doesn't mean that this component is not rendered on the server. So this is still server-side rendering, right? So don't get that confused. All this means is that it's not a React server component. So there's a difference. Both React server components and our use client components are in server-side rendering, but use client also means that it's also rendered on the client. And that's what causes hydration errors, if there is one state while it's being rendered on the server and another state when it's being rendered on the client. So models are problematic with that, because they can be opened by use effects, they can be opened by some renders, they can be opened by on clicks. So that's why we say, okay, if we are doing the server-side rendering, we are not going to show any models at all, because, well, they're not needed to be server-side rendered. It's completely fine for them to be on the client only. Great. And I'm just going to separate these two. And now what we have to do is we have to add this model provider inside of our root layout. So let's go inside of our app folder, find the root layout right here. And inside of this theme provider above the children, add model provider from add/components/provider/model provider. So just like this, and let's keep these providers together. So I'm also going to separate this too. There we go. So we have the theme provider and our model provider here. Great. And now let's go ahead and let me just expand my screen so we can see the sidebar again. And let's actually open that model when we click on this server right here. So in order to do that, we have to go inside of our navigation action. So let's go inside of components, navigation, and find the navigation action. So let me just see. I want you to see the name. There we go. Navigation dash action right here. Okay. And in here, we have to add the use model hook. So let's go ahead and let's write const. Let's destructure on open equals use model from add/hooks/use model, right? Like that. And then on this button right here inside of the action tooltip, add an onClick to be an arrow function, which calls on open for a type create server like this. There we go. And now if I click here, it should open, but let's see why it's not working. Oh, maybe I have to refresh. Maybe I didn't even start the application. Let's see which one it is. Let me try again. There we go. So it's working. I just had to refresh my application. Great. And now we should be able to create servers whenever we want and not just on the initial page. So let's check that out. I'm going to click add a server here. I'm going to go ahead and use an image from Unsplash like this. And I'm going to name this test server like this. And let's just click create and let's see if that is going to work. Okay, I also have to close the model. So that's one thing that I forgot, but there we go. And now if I click, you can see that my URL is changing and you can see how different these animations and styling look depending on which server is selected. Great. So let's just fix that when we create a server, we actually close this model. So we have to go back inside of create a server model. So not our initial model, but components, models, create server model. So this one right here. And we're going to use this on close inside of this on submit. So after router refresh, just call the on close. Great. So let's try again. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to upload another image from Unsplash. Let's call this server 2 like this. It doesn't really matter. Let's just click create and there we go. So the model closes and I can switch between my servers. Great job. What we have to do now is another sidebar which is going to render our channels. So now let's go ahead and let's create another sidebar right here where we are going to render all the all the channels inside of a specific server as well as all the members. So let's go ahead and let's go and close everything and go inside of your app folder, inside of main, routes, server ID, and go ahead and create a new file layout.tsx like this. And we're going to go ahead and call this server ID layout like that. Go ahead and add the children and go ahead and give the types for children to be React.React node like this. Great. Now go inside and just render the children like this. There we go. So the error is gone and we have our layout right here. So I'm just going to zoom this out so my sidebar is visible. Again, make sure that your sidebar is visible. So either zoom out or expand your tab, one of the two, because we are working in desktop mode for now. Great. So inside of this server ID layout, besides just children, we're also gonna go and add the params. So every server component has this prop params where you can read what is in the current URL. Great. So let's go ahead and let's fetch the current profile. So const profile await current profile from s/lib current profile like this. And let's turn this into an asynchronous layout. There we go. So now we can safely use await here. If there is no profile, in that case, return redirect to sign in from clerk next.js. And I'm just going to separate this two like this. Great. And now let's go ahead and let's find this server with this ID. So const server await db, import db from @/libdb like I did right here. So db.server.findUnique where ID is params the server ID like that. So how do I know that there's going to be a server ID inside of this prop params? Well, the way I know that is because I named my folder server ID. So if I named my folder something else ID, in that case, I would search for params something else ID. But since it is a server ID, I know that in this URL part right here, so this ID, that is mapped to this server ID folder right here. And that's how I can access it. And let's just go ahead and give this params a type. So below children, params are an object with server ID as a string inside. So we know that. Great. And it's not enough that we just check for the ID, because this way, any person that knows the ID of the server could load all channels and messages for that server. So we are also going to confirm that inside of its members of that server, we have a matching profile ID with the current profile ID, which we loaded right here. So this way, only the person who is a member of the server can actually load that server. Great. And if there is no such server, so if either someone who is not from this server is attempting to load, or if that server was deleted, we can just return and redirect to the root page. And let's go ahead and let's import, redirect from next/navigation like this. Great. And now let's go ahead and let's give this div a class name of h-full like this. Let's create another div here with a class name hidden mdflex h-full w-60 z-20 flex-call and inset-y-0 like this. Great. And let's just wrap the children inside of a main element like this. And let's give them a class name h-full and md-el-60. Great. So now we have to expand even a bit more to see our children. Is that true? Okay, so they're right here. Okay, we're gonna see what's up with that, but I think it's just because of the way we are developing right here. Oh, actually, I think I know what it is. I think I forgot to add fixed to these class names right here. So let me just expand this a bit. So we have hidden, mdflex, h-full, w60, z20, flex call, and after flex call, I actually want to put fixed and then inset y0, and there we go. So now it works. So now you can see that I have a sidebar right here, and then I have another space, and then I have my content. So in this new space here, we're going to render our channels, our members, and stuff like that. Great. So make sure you have these classes in this div where we're gonna have these servers, the server sidebar. Like this. So now when I expand, there we go. We have our navigation sidebar here. Here we're gonna have our server sidebar, and here we're gonna have the actual chat application. Great. So of course, instead of saying server sidebar here, we're actually gonna need to render the server sidebar component. So save this, and we're gonna get an error. So let's go ahead and let's fix this error by going inside of our components. Create a new folder called server, and inside create a new file, server-sidebar.tsx like this. Great. And let's just export const server sidebar. And let's just return a div saying server sidebar component, so we know it's coming from here. Let's go back inside of our app folder, main, routes, servers, server ID, layout, and let's import this from add/components/server/server sidebar like I did right here, and I'm just gonna order those like that. Great. So now if I save you're going to see that no more errors are shown. And now I have this text saying server sidebar component right here. Great. Okay, and now we have to go inside of this server sidebar and we actually have to start rendering some stuff inside. So before we continue that, we have to go back inside of our layout, inside of this server ID right here. So let me just expand this. So inside of this server ID layout, and one thing we have to pass the server sidebar is the server ID. So let's go ahead and let's write server ID to be params.server ID like this. Great. And now we can head back inside of our components, server sidebar right here. And let's write an interface, server sidebar props. This is going to be so server ID is going to be a string like that. Great. And now we have to assign this props to the actual component and make sure this is an asynchronous component. And it's going to be, of course, a server component. So let's write server sidebar props like that. Now let's go and fetch the current profile again. So const profile is equal await current profile from /lib current profile. If there is no profile, in that case, return redirect from next /navigation to / like that. Great. And let's just separate this two. And now let's fetch this server again. So the reason I'm fetching it both inside of the layout right here is because we're going to use this server sidebar component in one more place, and that's going to be the mobile sidebar, which is not going to have access to this layout. So I want to make this server sidebar component independent and only needed this server ID, so I can fetch the server inside one more time. Great. So let's use const server to be await db.server. And let's actually just import db from @/lib/db like this. So db.server.findUnique like that. And inside of here, I'm going to look for where ID is server ID like that. And now let's go ahead and include a bunch of stuff that we need here. So we're going to need all channels. So let's include the channels and let's order by created at ascending like that. Great. Besides channels, we're also going to need to include the members like that. And we're also going to need to include each member's profile so we can load their image, their name, their email, and stuff like that. And let's order them also by role ascending. So we're going to show the admins first, then the moderators, and then the guests. Great. And now below that, so after we load this server right here, let's go ahead and let's separate text channels, audio channels, and video channels in their own constant. So const text channels are going to be server $.channels.filter. We're going to find the individual channel. Let me just expand my screen as much as I can. We're going to find the individual channel and we're going to check whether the channel.type is equal to channel type, which you can import from @prisma/client. So this is what I imported right here. And let me just organize this import. So I'm going to keep this two at the top and this one at the bottom. So I imported channel type from @prisma/client. So we're going to check whether this channel type is text like this. And let me zoom out a bit so you can see how this looks in one line. So const text channels, we are looking for all the channels and only filtering those which have the text type. And I'm going to copy this 2 more times. The second one is going to be audio channels, right? And this one is going to check for channel type audio. And this one is going to be video channels. And this one we're going to check for type video like this. Great. So let me just zoom in back. So there we go. We have text channels checking if the channel type is text, audio channels checking for audio, and video channels checking for video like that. Great. And let's also get our members. So const members are going to be server $.members.filter individual member. And let's just filter out ourselves. So no need to show ourselves in the list. Member.profile ID is not equal to profile.id like this. Great. So I'm going to zoom this back so you can see how it all looks in one line like this. So text channels, checking for text, audio, checking for audio, video for video, and members. We filter throughout all the members and remove the ones which is ourselves, because this profile.id comes from the current profile here. Great. And make sure you don't accidentally do profile ID, so it's lowercase. And if you do it, it's going to throw you an error. So it's I lowercase d, profile ID like this. Great. And now let me zoom back in. And let's just do a redirect if there is no server. So return redirect to slash like that. And now let's find our role inside of this server. So whether to check if we are an admin, if we are a moderator or a guest. So const role is going to be server.members.find individual member. Member.profile ID is identical to our profile.id if it's found, so question mark dot role like this. So again, I'm going to zoom out so you can see how this looks in one line. So we look through all of the members and we search for our matching profile ID, which means, okay, we found the member. And once we found it, let's check the role. So the question mark is here because if you remove it, there is a possibility that we just don't find ourselves in the list of members. That should never happen, but still we have a question mark here to confirm that. Great. And now that we have that, that's actually nothing else we have to load. So let's go ahead and let's give this div a class name. So I'm gonna zoom in back. So class name for this div is gonna be flex-call h-full text-primary w-full. On dark, we're going to use a background of this hex code to be to the 3.1 like that. Otherwise, we're going to use a background of F2, F3, F5. So depending on whether we are light or dark mode, we're going to change the background. So let's see how this looks. There we go. And if I change to light mode, you can see how it looks a bit different. Great. So exactly what we wanted. Perfect. So yeah, just keep your sidebar component open. And great. Now let's remove this text for server sidebar component and let's actually render our server header like this. And inside of this server header, we're going to pass in the current server, which we loaded, and we're going to pass in the role like this. Great. So of course, we're going to get an error for this. So let's go ahead and let's resolve that. So we have to go inside of our components, inside of server, and create a new file, server-header.tsx like this. Great. Let's mark this as use client like that. And let's go ahead and let's create an interface, server header props like that. We need a server and we're going to need a specific type of server. So we can't just use the server from Prisma/client because this server also has channels, it also has members, and it also has profiles of those members. If you look at the server sidebar, look at this query right here. So we included the channels and we included the members. So take a look at, if I hover here, you can see that I get all of these types here. And if you take a look at this server, you can see that it doesn't have all of those types. So what we have to do is we have to create a types file. And then we're going to add that here. So you can save this file for now, the server header, ignore the error for now, and go ahead and create a new file called types.ts. So make sure it's in the root of your app, so not in any folder, so completely outside like this. And let's just write export const server. Whoops, export type, my apologies. Export type server with members with profiles like that. And that's going to be equal to server and open an object members, which is going to be open brackets, a member, and open an object again, profile, which is a profile like this. So now let's import server, member, and profile from @prisma/client. And at the end of these brackets, make sure you add an array like this. There we go. So now we have this type server with members with profiles like this. And now I'm going to close everything here. Let's go back inside of components, server header, and let's replace this server with members with profiles like that. And now we have the correct type for our server header. Great. Now let's write role, which is optional, member role like that from @prisma/client. So that can stay the same. Great. And now let's write export const server header. Let's return a div saying server header like this. And let's just extract this props, so server and the role, and let's map this server header props to it like that. Great. And now, if you go inside of your server sidebar right here, you can see that we have no errors. Well, actually, we can check for that because I forgot to import this. So go back to your server sidebar and input the server header from /server header like this. And I'm just going to keep those since they're in the same folder. No need to do the whole add/components. It's fine to keep them like this. Great. And you can see that we have no errors here. But let me just show you what would happen if we didn't do this custom type. So what if I just added a server here and used a server? Well, what would happen basically is that there seems to be no error here, but if I try server.members here, you can see that it doesn't work. If I try server.channels, you can see that it doesn't work as well. But if I use the server with members with profiles and then try server.members, there we go. Now I have the autocomplete. Great. So that's why we needed that. Perfect. So you can just save this and let me expand my screen a bit. So there we go. We have the server header text right here. And now let's continue developing. So first let's add some constants. So const is admin is going to be role is equal to member role dot admin like this. Const is moderator is going to be equal to is admin because every admin is also a moderator, or role is equal to member role dot moderator like this. Great. And now we're gonna have to create our drop-down menu. So replace these divs with the drop-down menu from /UI/drop-down menu. So make sure you don't accidentally import this from Radix. It's not gonna work otherwise. And I'm just gonna replace it with /components like this. And I'm gonna separate them for those types. And you can remove this server import if you have it from Prisma Client, but I think you don't have it because I was just demonstrating something with that. Great. Now inside of here, add the drop-down menu trigger from add/components/UI/drop-down menu. So please make sure you don't accidentally import things from Radix because it's going to break your styles and you're going to be wondering why is it not working? Well, in fact, it's just going to be the Radix thing. So always confirm that all of your drop-down imports are from /components/UI drop-down menu. The reason we have drop-down menu is because of the mode toggle for light and dark mode. That's when we added this component. Great. So inside of this trigger, let's go ahead and let's give it a class name of focus outline -none and as child prop like this. And inside, we're going to use a button like this. And we're going to give this button some class names. So let's go ahead and let's write class name w-full text-md font-semi-bold px-3 like this, flex items-center h-12 border-neutral-200. On dark mode, we're going to use border-neutral-800 border-b-2, and we're also going to have hover bg-sync-700/10, but on dark mode, it's going to be hover bg sync-700/50 and transition like this. Great. And inside, we're going to render server.name, so the currently server that we are on, and the chevron down icon from Lucid React. So make sure you have this import. I'm going to move it to the top right here. Great. This is a self-closing tag, and let's give it a class name of h-5, w-5, and ml-auto like this. And let me just expand my screen a bit. So there we go. Now when I go to Code with Antonio, you can see how it says Code with Antonio. When I go to test server, it says test server. When I go to this one, it says server 2. Great. So this is exactly what we wanted. So I'm just gonna zoom out like this so we can develop and see this sidebar here. Great. So now we have to create the actual drop-down content outside of this drop-down menu trigger. So add drop-down menu content from add/components/UI/drop-down menu. So just confirm that you have the drop-down menu content from /components, not from radix. Great. And let's go ahead and let's give this some class names. So class names are going to be w-56. Text is going to be extra small. Font is going to be medium. Text is going to be black on dark. Text is going to be neutral 400. And space -y is going to be 2 pixels like this. Great. So first thing we're going to add is the option to invite people. So both moderators and admins can do that. And if you look at our our constants here, we can use the isModerator to check whether the user is either an admin or a moderator. So all we have to do is add isModerator and let's go ahead and write drop-down menu item, again from add/components UI drop-down menu. So just confirm you have drop-down menu item from components drop-down menu. And inside I'm gonna write invite people like this. And you can see how I have a small little invite people box right here. So I'm sorry this is so zoomed out, but if I zoom in, it's gonna turn into mobile mode and you're not gonna see absolutely anything. Okay, great. So now let's go ahead and let's give this some class names. So class name is gonna be text-indigo-600. Dark is gonna be text-indigo-400 like that. Px is going to be 3, py is going to be 2, text is going to be small, and cursor is going to be pointer like this. Great, so let's see that. There we go. So now invite people looks a bit better. And now let's add an icon. So user plus from Lucid React. Make sure you have that imported. So I have chevron down and user plus from Lucid React. Great. It is a self-closing tag, and let's give it a class name of h-4, w-4, and ml-auto like this. There we go. So now you can see how nice this looks. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and let's just copy and paste this below like this. So now we have 2 items. If I click, I have twice the invite people. And let's change this to isAdmin like this. And let's just modify this to not use any text indigo. So you can remove this text indigo. So just make sure that this class name, this dropdown item has the padding on top and on the sides, a small text, and a cursor pointer. Instead of invite people, this is going to say server settings like this. And instead of user plus, we're going to use the settings icon from Lucid React. So make sure you have chevron down, settings, and user plus from Lucid React. Great. And only an admin can see the server settings, and only an admin can open that model when we create it. Great. So let's go ahead and copy this again. Just fix the indentation. And this one is also going to be just for the admin. So we can leave this if and change the server settings to manage members like that. And instead of using the settings icon, we're going to use the users icon from Lucid React. So just make sure you have that imported. Great. So now we have invite people, server settings, and manage members here. Perfect. And now we're going to go ahead and add a new one. So just copy and paste that but this one is going to be visible for both admins and moderators. So we can just use is moderator because every admin by default is also a moderator. And let's go ahead and change manage users to create channel like this. Great. And let's change the users icon to plus circle from Lucid React. So just make sure you have plus circle from Lucid React. Great. And if I click now, I have server settings, manage members, and create a channel. Great. Now let's go ahead. After this, let's just add another is moderator and this one is just going to render a drop-down menu separator from add/components UI drop-down menu like this. So make sure you have this imported from UI drop-down menu and not from Radix. Okay, so you can see how I have this small little line here at the bottom. So only admins and moderators need this separation because guests are only going to have one action, and that is to leave the server. So no point in showing this separator then. Great, and now we can just copy and paste this one from above. So from above this separator and paste it here. Okay. And instead of saying is moderator, this one is only going to be for the admins. So is admin like this. And instead of create channel, it's going to say delete server like this. And instead of plus circle, we're going to use the trash icon from Lucid React. So make sure you have imported the trash icon from Lucid React. Great, and now I have this delete server right here. And let's just add a class name to this drop-down menu item, which holds the delete server, to use text-rows-500 like this. Great, so we can see now when you click, delete server is a red, meaning that it's a dangerous action. Great, and now let's go ahead and copy this one last time. And we're gonna create the last one. And this one is going to be very simple. So we're going to do the opposite of is admin. So we're going to just add an exclamation point. So if we are a moderator or if we are a guest, basically, if we are not an admin, only then we're going to have the option to leave the server. So admins cannot leave the server. Admins can only delete their own service. And instead of the icon trash, let's use the logout icon from Lucid React. So make sure you have logout like this. And now I actually cannot see that because I am an admin, but guests and moderators will be able to see that. Great. So let me just expand this entire thing and zoom in so you can see how this looks. There we go. Invite people, server settings, manage members, create channel, and delete server. Perfect. So we're going to now create models for all of this right here. So now let's go ahead and let's create our invite functionality, which is the first drop-down action right here to invite people. In order to do that, we first have to visit our use model store. So let's go inside of the hooks and pick the use model store right here. And alongside create server, go ahead and add a pipe. And this one is gonna say invite. So just invite like this. Great. Now we have to extend our model store a bit. So alongside model store, we're also going to have an interface model data like this. And for now, model data is only going to accept a potential server. So it doesn't have to, but if we want to, we're going to send in a server. And you can pass that from Prisma/client like this. Great. And now inside of here, after type, add data, and data is going to be model data like this. Great. So now go ahead and add a data in here, and by default it's going to be an empty object. And now extend this is open to also accept a data prop, which by default is going to be empty, which means we also have to change it in this on open right here. So go ahead and add data, optional data, model data like this. Great. So we added data, model data, and on open we added data here, and we defined the potential items we can send in a model. Great. So alongside setting the type, we're also going to set the data. So let me just expand my screen. So onOpen has a type and a data. And if we pass in the data, it's going to be stored in our model store. So for example, right now we're going to have to open our invite model with some information about that server. So that's why we're going to send the server inside the data using this onOpen function right here. Great. So let's go back inside of our server header, which is inside components, server header right here. And at the top right here above the is admin, let's add const onOpen from use model like this. From add/hooks use model store. So make sure you have use model imported from add/hooks use model store. Great. And now let's find the first drop down item which says invite people. And we're going to add an onClick here, which is going to open that model. So let's go ahead and write onClick like this, an arrow function onOpen. We're going to open the invite model and we're going to go ahead and pass in the data, so just an object like this with a server like this. So this is the equivalent. We're just going to use a shorthand operator like this. And where do we get this server from? Well, we have it in the props right here. Great. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and we can create our invite model. Great. So let's go ahead and let's close everything here. Let's go inside of our components, models, and you can just copy the create server model and paste it again and rename it to invite-model like this. Great. Let's go ahead and let's remove this form schema. We're not going to need it. That means that we can also remove this entire form right here. So you can remove that. You can also remove this is loading, and you can also remove this on submit right here. Same thing for handle close. So you can remove that as well. And you can change this handle close to directly use this onClose from use model. So just onClose like this. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's remove this entire form. So we don't need absolutely anything here. You can go ahead and remove this entire form. So just leave the dialog header ending here, and you can just write invite model like this. Great. Let's also remove the router like this. Let's rename this to invite model like that. And you can now remove all of these imports. We don't need them. Same thing for form like this. And you also don't need the dialog footer. Great. And same thing for all of these components here. Great, so we have a very simple model right here. Just make sure you're doing that inside the invite-model. And now let's change this is model open to not look for the create server, but for invite like this. There we go. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's add this invite model to our model providers. So go inside of your providers, model provider like this. And go ahead and below create server model, add invite model like this from /models/invite model. And I'm just going to go and replace this to /components like this. There we go. And I think that already now we can try and press on invite people, and there we go. So you can see how we have this invite model right here. So let me just zoom this out so we can work with this model. So I'm going to click again. Okay, there we go. Now let's go ahead and let's go back inside of our invite model, which is inside of our components models invite model right here. And let's change the title. So it's not going to be customized server. It's going to be invite friends like this. And we don't need the dialog description. You can remove that. And you can also remove this dialog description import like that. Great. So now go below the dialog header here, remove this invite model text and create a div. This div is going to have a class name of padding 6 like that. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's add a label here. So label from /UI/label. So make sure you've imported this from /UI label, but we're going to change that to /components like that. And let's just join these two together. Great. So we have the label here, and let's just write server invite link like this. Great. So you can see how it now says server invite link here. Let's go ahead and let's give this label a class name, which is going to be uppercase text-xs font-bold text-sync-500 dark text-secondary/70, like this. Great. And now below this, we're going to create a div. So below the label, we're going to create a div, and we're going to go ahead and give this div a class name of flex items-center margin top -2 and gap -x -2, like that. Great. So save this, and inside we're going to go ahead and add our input from /UI input. So make sure you import the input, and I'm just going to replace this with components like this. Great. So inside of this input, let's go ahead and let's write a class name, which is going to be bg-sync-300/50 border-0 focus-visible ring-0 text-black and focus-visible ring-offset-0, like this. Great. Let's give it a value for now of invite link. So we're just gonna hard code invite link like this. Great. And alongside this input, but still inside of this div, let's add a button from /UI button. So make sure you import this button right here. And let's replace this with components like that. Great. And in here, we're going to give it a size of icon like that. So go ahead and just write a copy from Lucid React icon. So make sure you've imported copy from Lucid React. I'm going to move it to the top, just below the use client like this. And let's go ahead and let's give this a class name of W-4 and H-4 like this. Great. And now outside of this div right here, let's go ahead and add another button, which is going to say generate a new link like this. So just below this, we're going to have this generate a new link. So now let's go ahead and style it a bit. So first thing I'm going to do is variant is going to be link like this. Size is going to be small like that. And class name is going to be text-extra small and text-sync-500, and margin top is going to be 4. There we go. So we have a nice generate a new link text right here. Perfect. Now, inside of this button, we're going to add refresh CV like this, lowercase w. There we go. So refresh CV, and let's make sure you import that from Lucid React. Okay, now let's just style it a bit. So let's go ahead and let's give it a class name of W-4, H-4, and margin right -2 like this. Okay. And let's just modify this. So instead of margin right, let's use margin left. There we go. So now it's better. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and let's create one hook, which we're going to need to read the current URL. So let's go inside of our hooks and create a new file, use-origin.ts like this. Great. And inside of here, we're going to write export const use origin like that. This is going to be a very simple hook. So const mounted, set mounted, use state from React, default value is false like this, use effect, also import that from React, empty dependency array, and set mounted is going to be true like this. Great. Now let's write const origin to be type of window is not undefined like that, and window.location.origin question mark window.location.origin or an empty string like this. So let me just zoom out so you can see this in one line, and let me also expand my window. So like this, origin is a type of window. So if type of window is not undefined, and if we have the window location .origin, in that case render the window.location.origin, otherwise render an empty string. Great. So now let's go ahead and let's write if mounted like that, return null. So if we are not mounted, make sure you put an exclamation point here, and you actually don't have to return null. You can also just return an empty string. Otherwise, return origin like that. Great. So just make sure you have this hook. You can close this now and go back inside of your invite model. And let's go ahead and let's add that hook now. So just below this use model, const origin, use origin. From add/hooks, use origin like this. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's create a constant here. So const invite URL is going to be backticks at origin like this, and copy this invite URL and replace the value of this input where we hard-coded the invite link. So just change it to a dynamic invite URL. So now it says localhost 3000 in this invite friends. Great. So now let's go ahead and let's extract the model data which we passed. So in order to do that, what we have to do is just extract server from data. And we need to make sure to extract the data from use model like this. And then we can use this server to extend this invite URL. So add /invite /server, open special object, server $.invite code like this. There we go. So now let me just show you. You can see that in my model, I have a /invite and the invite code from my database. Great. So let's go ahead and let's continue developing this model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some constants. Const copied, set copied to be use state from React. Default value is false, so make sure you import use state from React. I'm just going to move it here to the top like that. And let's also add const is loading, set is loading, use state false like this. Great. Now let's create a function to actually copy this. So const on copy is going to be an arrow function, which is going to call the navigator.clipboard write text invite URL like this. So we're going to copy this constant invite URL using the origin /invite and the invite code. Great. And we're going to set copied to true. And then we're going to add a timeout like this. Set copied to false after 1000 milliseconds equaling to 1 second. Great. So you're going to see what that does now. So let's go and find the copy button. So it's this one inside of this div, which has our input and has a copy Lucid icon inside. And let's give it an on click on copy like this. Okay. And now let's just change this. So if it's copied, in that case, we're going to render check icon from Lucid React. So make sure you import the check from Lucid React. Otherwise, we're going to render this copy icon, so you can remove it from here and paste it inside. And you can copy this class name here and paste it here. There we go. So we can also display this like this, so it's a bit clearer. There we go. And now you can see how this effect is going to look. So I'm going to zoom in back into my model. So when I click copy, you can see that I get a check mark and then it's back to copy it again. Perfect. Great. So what I have to do now is a function to regenerate this link. So let's go ahead and let's write that function. So below the onCopy, let's write a const on new to be an asynchronous function like this. Open a try and catch block. In the catch error, we're just going to console log the error. And in the finally, you're going to set is loading to false, which means that in the try block, we're going to set is loading to true like this. Great. And now let's just write const response to be await Axios, which you can import from Axios. So make sure you import Axios. I'm just going to move it all the way to the top here. Great. So await Axios dot patch, open pointy brackets, open backticks, /API /servers /server.id /invite code like that, and just put a question mark in the server.id like this. So let me just expand this so you can see it in one line. And there we go. So const response is equal to await axios.patch/API/servers, the server ID, invite code. So we're going to use this Axios patch to refresh the invite code. And what we're going to do now is we're going to call our onOpen again. So make sure you extract that from use model. So let me zoom in back. So we're going to call onOpen again from this use model hook. And we are literally going to open the very same model. So invite model, and we're just going to update its data by passing server to be response.data. So we're going to get the updated invite code, and then this server invite code, this constant, is going to get immediately refreshed. Great. Now let's use this as loading for some disabled states. Great. So let's go ahead and let's find our input. Right here, let's give it a disabled. Off is loading, like that. Let's give the copy button a disabled if we are loading. And let's give the regenerate a disabled if we are loading, like that. Great. So now if you try and click on this, actually we have not assigned what actually calls this on new function. So let's go ahead and let's find our generate a new link button and give it an on click to call on new like this. Great. So now if I try and click generate a new link, I'm gonna get a 404 Axios error. There we go. So I get a 404 in my console because we have not created that route yet. So now let's go ahead and let's do that. So let's head into our app folder. So right here, we can close everything. App folder, API, servers, and you're gonna have to create a new folder, server ID, inside of brackets like this. And inside create a route.ts like this. Great. And now let's go ahead and write export asynchronous function patch, which has a request of type of request, and it has params. And let's give them a type. Params is an object which holds the server ID, which is a type of string, and we know that because this folder has a server ID name. Great. So now that we have that, let's open a try and catch block. So in the catch, let's log the error. So console log server ID and just paste in the error like this. And let's return new next response from next/server like this, internal error, and just pass in the status of 500 like this. Great. In the try block, let's go ahead and fetch the profile. So const profile is await current profile from add/lib current profile like this. If there is no profile, in that case, return new next response unauthorized with a status of 401 like this. Status. There we go. And now what we have to do is check if we don't have the params server ID. So if there are no params.server ID, return new next response server ID missing with a status of 400. Great. And now let's actually update our server. So const server is equal to await db, which you can import from add/lib db. So make sure you do this. Great. And now let's write await db.server.update like this, where id is equal to params.server ID and profile ID is equal to profile.id like this. Great. And data is equal to invite code. And what we have to do is generate a new invite code. In order to do that, we have to import our UUID library. So import v4 as UUID v4 from UUID like this. Great. So just go back to the invite code and call the UUID v4 and execute the function. So only an admin will be able to do this call because we are checking for the profile ID that created this server. So no need to check inside of the members and then find some and then find the role or profile ID. So no need to do anything like that. We can just check the profile ID because the only profile ID that's possible to be in this server is the creator of the server. Great. And now that we updated this server, let's just return new next, so next response.json and pass in the server like this. Great. Perfect. So now let's try what happens. So I'm gonna refresh this. I'm gonna click invite people and I'm gonna click generate a new link, and let's see if we are still getting some errors. So I'm generating a new link. Okay, it still says that it's 404. So let me just go ahead and debug this. All right, so the mistake is very simple. So you can see that I'm pointing at /invite code, but I never created that route. The route that I created is server ID route.ts. So what I have to do is create a new folder, invite-code inside of this server ID folder, and drag and drop this route inside. So just move it like this. There we go. Save the file again. Let's refresh this now. And if I am correct, after I click on invite people and generate a new link, there we go. You can see how the invite URL changes every time we click generate a new link. Perfect. So what we have to do now is the actual functionality that when someone enters this inside of their URL, they actually join this server. Because if you try and paste this now here, you're gonna get a 404 because we never created this page. So now let's go ahead and let's do that. So let's go back inside of our app folder. So I'm gonna close everything here. Just make sure you saved all of these files and make sure that your generation is working. Okay, and now let's go back inside of the app folder and let's create a new organizational folder called invite, like this. And this invite is not gonna have any layout. It's just gonna have routes like this. And inside, let's create a new folder called invite, like that. And inside of that, create another folder in brackets, invite code, like this. And that's gonna be our page.tsx. Great. So invite organizational folder, routes organizational folder, invite folder, and invite code folder, which is dynamic. Perfect. So let's go ahead and let's write invite code page like this. You can just return a div hello invite. For now, it doesn't matter. It's not going to have any content. It's just going to do and it's just going to add you to the server and then redirect you to the server. So let's go ahead and let's create an interface. Invite code page props, params, invite code is a string like this. So make sure that this invite code inside of the params matches the folder name. So invite code, it needs to be the same. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's extract the params here and let's just map that to invite code page props. Perfect. Let's make this page asynchronous so we can do some calls to the database now. So first one we're going to do is fetching the current profile. So const profile is equal await current profile from add/lib current profile, like I've imported here at the top. Great. If there is no profile, in that case, return redirect to sign in from clerk next.js. So I'm just going to separate those two. Great. Now, if there are no params.invite code, return redirect from next/navigation. So make sure you import redirect from next/navigation. I will move that to the top as well. And we're just going to redirect to the root page. So if the user doesn't enter the invite code, we can just return them back. Now let's check if the person trying to join this server is by chance already in this server. So for that, we're going to write const existing server to be await db and import db from add/lib/db like I did right here. Great. So await db.server.find first like this, where invite code is equal to params.invite code. So if it matches and if members sum profile ID is equal to profile.id. So if we match the invite code of the server we are trying to join, and if we are already a member of that server, in that case, all we have to do is redirect the user back to that server. No need to join again. So if existing server, return redirect open backticks /servers / existing server.id inside of this special object. Perfect. And now let's create a case to join the server. So const server is equal await db.server.update like this, where invite code is equal to params.invite code like that, data, and we have to create a new member. So members create open an array, open an object, profile ID is equal to profile.id. And we don't need to explicitly give it a role of guest, because by default, everyone who joins is going to be a guest. Great. So let me just check what this error is about. All right, so I found our mistake. Our mistake is in our schema.